Welcome to Breaking Ties, a new you after divorce. This is your go-to source for practical advice and support for when the divorce process has finished. Join us each weekday for a quick chat where we'll cover a variety of topics related to post-divorce. Together, we'll explore the emotional, financial, and legal aspects of life after divorce and help you find the best path forward for you and your family. Here's your host and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst professional, Mike Fulkerson.
Hello and welcome to the Breaking Ties interview series. This is where we talk with professionals in the divorce space who assist others, really getting through the divorce process and answer many of the questions that you might have. I'm your host, Mike Fulkerson, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst professional. And with me today is Chris Lunardini. Chris is a divorce attorney with SPYRATOSDAVIS. I'm going to have that trouble all week here in Lisle, Illinois. So we are going to get some fantastic information straight from the source. I'm going to be the first to welcome you to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I greatly appreciate it. It's great to be here and glad to be able to help people out.
Yeah, that's great. No, we appreciate your time as well. And so when we look at being a guest on the show for the first time, one of the things that I always like to do is have you share a little bit about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been practicing law for 24 years now. We have two offices, one in Lisle and another one in Chicago. I practice all over the Chicago area and the Chicago suburbs. My primary counties are DuPage, Kendall, Kane, Will County, Cook County, do some Lake County and some of the others as well. But so we handle areas all around the Chicago area. I've been practicing, as I said, for 24 years. Most of my work is divorce work. So I do divorce, custody disputes, visitation disputes, adoptions, prenuptial agreements, and anything else that falls within family law.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. You cover it all. It sounds like for all, all intents and purposes right there. So, and, as you and I know, there's, many different pieces of the divorce process. And throughout the course of this week, we're going to go through a number of those and get your feel on those.
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Yeah. So I think for our listeners and viewers, probably the best place to start is kind of just to get your definition of what do you consider a traditional divorce process to be?
Traditional divorce is oftentimes when you get two parties. They may own single family residence. They have a couple of children, minors under the age of 18, and they have issues. They may or may not be really highly contested, but they have not yet reached an agreement on those issues. And that's most typical what you'll see in the divorce situation.
All right. Yeah. It's a great example you gave there on all, kind of like the family structure, if you will, because, I'm being divorced myself. I fit that same category. We had the house, the two kids, and the dog, kind of situation.
Right.
So, so it's one of those things where, it's sad. You don't like to see all that stuff, but at the same time, it is what it is from a situational standpoint.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is they don't have an agreement yet. And that's most often what you see. And most divorces get finished by a settlement agreement. Over 90% of them get resolved through agreement, but it takes some time to get there. And again, they may not be, highly contested. It may not be a case where it's litigated for years, but it's a situation where you got to work through some of the issues and just reach a settlement and an agreement on them.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of negotiation that can go on just, for things that they want to split up. Now, when we look at the beginning of the process, we're often looking for a divorce attorney for a lot of reasons for many of our listeners and stuff. So when someone comes in to interview a divorce attorney, is there some keys they should be looking for? And then I think what's interesting is your take on being the attorney. What are you looking for from a new client?
Sure. So I think from the client's perspective, what they should be looking for, first of all, you want an attorney who is experienced and you think has practiced in not only the area but in the county where you're going to be filing for divorce. I think that's helpful. Most attorneys, if they practice in a county and have a lot of experience there, it's not that they're going to get favorable consideration by the judge, but they know how the process works. They know how the judges work. They know what the ins and outs of the judges' courtrooms are, so they can help move the case quicker. I think one of the biggest thing you should look for, or anybody should look for when looking for an attorney, is an attorney they can talk to, someone they can feel comfortable with, someone they feel that they can communicate with. Most divorce attorneys, they're going to have a good understanding of the law. You're going to have, of course, good attorneys and some okay attorneys and some great attorneys, run the whole gamut. But I think the biggest defining issue for most clients is they can talk to the attorney. Most attorneys are going to do a good job for you, and they're going to want to try and do a good job for you. But whether you can communicate with them and whether you feel like they do a good job communicating with you is going to be a big deal, because there's a lot of back and forth in a divorce relationship with a client. So I think that's the biggest thing to look for. And then they should look for somebody that can fit within their budget. Do not be afraid to talk about the money issue. It is an expensive endeavor to do a divorce. Even if it's an agreed divorce, it is still an expense you're going to have to put aside. You want to know if this is an attorney that's going to be able to work with you, that's going to have different types of payment arrangements that you meet your budget, or if they only have a couple of options. That way you know what you're getting into and you know what you're going to be able to afford, and if this is someone that will work for you.
Right. And that's definitely a great segue to just the next kind of tidbit or question, which is just to build on that is, how are, let's say, attorney fees worked out? Is it I know like when I went through it, I had a retainer, but then there's like an hourly that goes against it or something like that. I mean, is that pretty typical of how attorney-client relationships work?
Yes, usually. So usually in most divorces, you're going to have a retainer. The retainer is it's kind of like an advance, an upfront payment towards whatever the fees are going to be. Most attorneys bill at an hourly rate. It's usually between $250 and $350, and depending, Chicago firms and some other firms can charge more than that. But usually it's going to be an hourly rate in that range. And then as the attorney does the work, they're going to draw from that retainer that they put into an account set aside for their clients, and they'll draw from that retainer to pay for your monthly bill. You should get a statement every month, and it should show you what work has been done, how many hours were put in, how much that totals in the amount of a bill, and then what's left on your retainer. And then oftentimes as the retainer gets used up, if the case is still going on, the attorney will have you refill that retainer. Our office will do some creative things with our billing arrangements to allow people to continue. They may put in a lesser retainer, but then they'll pay every month a set amount to go into the account so that there's money there to cover the work to be done. If it's an uncontested divorce, and we consider an uncontested divorce to be a case where the parties have an agreement on all of the major issues in the divorce, and the case is only going to require 1 to 2 court appearances, we may charge a flat fee for that divorce depending on what's involved. And that flat fee usually encompasses everything. That's the flat charge, regardless of what happens in the case, whether it takes a little longer or it gets done a little shorter, you're going to pay that flat fee. But then if it becomes a contested matter, when I say contested, it means that there's more litigation that's needed, more court appearances, it will then convert into an hourly case because it's going to be more involved than initially thought. So we will have different arrangements like that depending what the client's needs are. Another thing that the clients should be aware of is that there's typically in every divorce case filing fees. Those are separate from the attorney's fees. Those are required by the court and by the court clerk's office to be paid for. And oftentimes we will bill those separately and have those paid separately because we have to pay those fees to the court to start the case and get it going. So those have to be paid by the client. So those are some of the examples of the fee arrangements that we offer and that you'll typically see in the divorce world.
Wow. Yeah, that is fantastic information right there. I mean, I don't know how many people I've talked to that are like, well, how does it work? How does it get paid? So appreciate you sharing that with everybody.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad it can be overwhelming sometimes, but I think it's very important that people feel comfortable enough to talk with their attorney openly about what is this going to cost. An attorney can't tell you exactly how much a divorce is going to cost you, especially if there are issues that have to be worked out, and it's going to depend on the amount of time that's involved and the amount of appearances you have to make in court. But an attorney should be able to give you an estimate, a general idea, a range as to what the divorce should cost you, and they should be able to talk with you, and you should be able to talk with them as the case goes on, how that range or that estimate is changing. Because it can, and not more often than not, it will change depending on how cooperative or how uncooperative the parties are. Have those discussions. Understand what the cost is going to be.
Absolutely. All right. Well, hey, that's going to conclude our first day of the interview. I want to have our listeners know that this is going to happen every day this week. And we're going to have 5 separate interviews with 5 separate sets of questions here with Chris. And so make sure you join us tomorrow as we continue our discussion on the traditional divorce process and attorneys. Chris and I would like to thank you for joining us today on this session of Breaking Ties, the interview series. Should you have any questions for Chris, his information is going to be over in the description of the podcast. Feel free to reach out to him. He's happy to assist you any way he can. And remember, divorce is not the end of your story. It is the start of your next great chapter. And with that, we'll see you all tomorrow. Take care.
Take care.
Hello, and welcome back to day 2 of the Breaking Ties interview series, where we talk with a professional who assists those in the divorce space getting through, life's changes with the divorce. And we really look to answer a lot of questions and common concerns you may have as a listener. Now, I'm your host, Mike Fulkerson, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst professional. And with us this week, we are lucky to have Chris Lunardini. He is a divorce attorney with SPYRATOSDAVIS in Lisle, Illinois. And if you missed yesterday's episode, you're going to want to go back and see that because it was really good. There was a lot of good information on getting started with the divorce process that you are going to want to listen to. Welcome back to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks for having me again. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you coming back, and the information you provided yesterday was fantastic. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, we're going to move on with a new set of questions here, and we're going to start with kind of following up the theme from yesterday as far as getting started. And that is, when someone does work with an attorney and they found their divorce attorney, what's the attorney going to ask them to bring? What do they need to get prepared to get this process moving?
That's a really good question. And it's actually very helpful. The more you can bring up front, the easier it makes the process down the road. So I think the biggest thing to bring, one, if you've been sued in the divorce process or your spouse has filed the divorce process against you, bring those pleadings, bring the filings that were filed against you, you were served with them, or if you weren't served but your spouse provided them to you because you were willingly accepting the process to get it going, bring all of that with you to see your attorney. Bring with you as much financial information as you can. Now, no attorney expects that you're going to have it all available for you initially. To bring in and open up the case, but as much of it as you can bring in, have it with. Your attorney can make copies of it. We scan it, we save it to our cloud server system, so all the documents are available online and digitally. So as much of it as you bring initially makes the process easier for us to get it later. So bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns, any kind of statements for retirement accounts, all of those types of documents are very helpful initially, because not only does it show what's available, but it helps to keep track of what are the accounts out there that have to be divided up as part of the divorce. Whether you think it's actually divorce property or marital property to be divided in the divorce, or you don't, bring it with anyways, so your attorney has it and can use it and can access it later. The other thing to do is start having an idea, and you may not have it all chiseled out and all put out at this point, but have an idea of what you think. If you have children, minor children that are involved in the process of the divorce, have an idea of what you think that parenting schedule and that parenting arrangement should look like. So that way you've got something to start working with, talking with your attorney about, and it can start the discussion going. Because oftentimes that can be one of the longer parts of getting a divorce completed. Our firm, our office, we have what we call our firm's intake form, and it's kind of a thumbnail outline that we give to clients to have them fill out that gives us an itemized list of the financial issues, the parenting issues, and any other issues that might be coming up in the divorce. So if you encounter that when you're hiring an attorney, fill that out and get that back to them as soon as possible. So that way they know what are the things they need to get, what are the issues they need to worry about.
Right. And as you and I will agree, the less time with the attorney means the less it costs.
Yes, absolutely. And that is important.
So yeah, being organized really does help. It really helps the process, but I also think it helps the client as well with helping with the decision making and figuring out what they want to have happen or what is important to them at the same time.
Absolutely. And as I most often encounter, one party is going to be the party that has more of the information than the other most often in most divorces, just because that's the way the relationship worked out over the years. So even if you don't have all the information, but you just have an idea, okay, I know we've got 4 retirement accounts out there. I'm not sure exactly where they're all at and who they're all with, but I know we've got 4 of them. That's important. It helps the attorney keep track of what information do they need to get down the line. And the more organized you are, the easier it makes to start having the discussions about how are things going to get divided up and what is the parenting schedule going to look like with regard to the children. So it's very helpful for not only the attorney, but it's helpful for the client. It's helpful for you as well, because going through that helps you to start organizing in your own head. What do I need to do?
Exactly. Yeah. And you can never be too organized. Now, we got all this information and stuff, and we've talked about this a little bit around in a circle here, which is time. How long is this divorce process going to take? Is there any rhyme or reason to how long a certain case takes?
There is absolutely. I will tell you that the biggest impact on how long a divorce takes is how well the parties can work together. Now, no divorce attorney expects that the parties are going to work really well together and get this done real quick, because otherwise they probably are not going to be getting a divorce. Because if they're getting along that well, it's uncommon to see that in a divorce case. But you got to pick and choose your battles. You've got to understand what are the higher issues, the bigger, more important issues, which ones are the lesser ones. Put your time and your money into the bigger issues, the more important ones to you. Not all of them, not all of the small ones. Be ready to prioritize the issues. The better you can prioritize, the easier it makes the process, the easier it makes it for people to start talking. Most divorces, especially in the suburban counties, they're going to take about a year to a year and a half to get done. They can be done quicker if the parties get on the same page and start working through some of the issues together. I've had divorces get done in about 3 to 4 months. So it really is going to depend on how well the parties work together. But you can probably plan about a year. That's probably a good thumbnail sketch, an idea of how long a divorce takes. If the parties really can't get an agreement and they're really at wit's end and kind of battling it out with each other on some of the issues because they just can't reach an agreement, whether it's one party's fault or the other party's fault, it can take upwards of a year and a half to even 2 years to get a divorce done. Parties have to be ready for that. If you're in a big county like Cook County, their court system is already very full with cases. So as a result, cases are just going to take longer to begin with because of that. So be prepared for that. It may take a couple extra months just because you're in Cook County. Smaller suburban county, you're going to have a little bit more leeway with the judge's calendar, and you'll be able to get things in and get moving a little more quickly. So you have to be aware of that too. It oftentimes is not the attorneys that is causing a case to take time with scheduling. It's very often a judge's, the court's position on the case. The courts and the judges do have their own calendars. They have to work in and work around. So your case is not the only one on their docket.
Exactly. You're not the only 2 people getting a divorce. So, but yeah, I mean, I never really thought about different court systems having different scheduling and lengths of time depending on how busy they are. So that's a really interesting tidbit, I think. Now, that's really going to wrap up day 2 here today. And this is a 5-part series. So if you haven't listened to yesterday's episode, please go back and check it out. Chris gave some fantastic information then, as he did today. I mean, this is interesting stuff. I always like learning about things, even though, it is divorce and it's not, really that cheerful of a topic, if you will. but it is still interesting information that I think many people and listeners can use. So once again, we would like to thank you for joining us today. If you have questions for Chris, his information's in the description for the episode, so feel free to drop him a line or shoot him an email. He's definitely going to help you out and return with some good information there. And we're going to see you tomorrow. So you're going to come back as we have a new set of questions for Chris tomorrow to answer and get some great, fantastic information again. Chris and I would like to thank you. And remember, divorce is not the end of your story. It is the start of your next great chapter. Have yourself a great day. Take care.
Have a good day.
Hello, and welcome back to day 3 of 5 of the Breaking Ties interview series. I'm your host, Mike Fulkerson, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst professional. And we're going to ask our guest today, Chris Lunardini, questions on the divorce process from an attorney's point of view. And this, has really been a good week. And if you haven't listened to the first 2 weeks of the episodes, please go back and listen to them. Right now, Chris is a divorce attorney with SPYRATOSDAVIS. I think I've gotten that wrong every day, in Lisle, Illinois. So we're going to get some more really good information today from Chris. So welcome back again, Chris. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me back. Good to see you again, Mike.
Absolutely. We love it. The information you get, it's straight to the point. It's exactly what you want to hear and learn and stuff. So it's really good. So today we're not slowing down. We got our foot on the pedal here, and we are looking at a lot of kind of dividing asset questions today, property questions. So we're going to start with, how does property kind of get divided in divorce? When I think of property, I'm thinking of who gets to keep the house.
That is great. No, those are very good questions, and those come up all the time. And oftentimes you'll get the question, not only who's keeping the house, but it'll be, well, my name's the only one on the house, so it's mine, right? And I think what people don't understand is that Illinois is a state where any property that you come into possession of, whether you bought it, whether it was given to you, whether you sold it, however you received it, if it came into your possession during the marriage, it's considered marital property by the court. As a matter of fact, it's not just considered, it's assumed to be marital property. So if you're going to say it's not, and the significance there is property that's not marital property does not get divided up as part of the divorce. So if you've got property that you're going to say is not marital property, you have to show and prove to the court that it's not marital property. I'm not going to go through all the different arrangements and all the different scenarios that can create non-marital property. But what you need to know, for the most part, if you came into it during the marriage, including income, including retirement accounts, including pensions, that's a big one I have. I often get the question of, well, it's my pension. I've been working there. Yes, but you've been working there for the majority of your life while you've been married. Therefore, your spouse is entitled to a portion of that pension. All of those things, they're all part of the marital estate. The court has every power and ability to divide it up as part of the divorce. So people have to be aware of that. And that's part of the initial conversation, to get them comfortable with that idea. So with that, the court is usually looking to divide up the property in what we call an equitable fashion. And Mike, do you know what an equitable fashion is?
Yeah, I do know what an equitable fashion is. It's fair, but not equal.
Right. It does not mean it's necessarily equal, although oftentimes it is.
Right.
It's not always equal, but it's what the court considers fair. So there's some leeway there based on circumstances, and no two circumstances are alike. But oftentimes what we're doing in divorce is we're basically taking a whole full sort of roll call and assessment of what are all the properties that are considered marital, and all the debt. Any debt you came into as part of the marriage too is all considered marital debt. So we try to take a determination of what's all the property, what's all the debt. We try to put it together into kind of a spreadsheet, and then we just try to divide it up as in a fair and usually a 50-50. At least we start from a 50-50 position. And then we try to figure out, are there circumstances that mean a little more should go to one party or to the other? So in general, that's how we look to divide it up. But you're right. The house is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, there's always a few hot buttons, with it. I mean, like you said, the other one is often retirement accounts, but it's my money that I saved. Well, okay, yes, but at the same time, there's other circumstances where if you have a non-working spouse, it's like they didn't have the opportunity to save. So, fair is fair type of situation.
Exactly, and that's exactly how the court approaches it. They look at it from the perspective of, well, one spouse stayed at home and watched the kids, or took care of the house, or whatever they may have done, took care of a sick relative for the family or something like that. And that's the reason why they maybe weren't able to work as much and put as much in the retirement account. So therefore, any retirement accounts, any pension accounts, they are considered to be both parties to be divided up between the two of them. The house is, and usually the house and retirement are the biggest issues because that is usually the biggest assets most people have. The house it can be easy or it can be difficult. If you're dividing up the house, the easiest way to divide up the house is say, okay, nobody wants to keep it anymore. The kids have moved out. They're out to college. It's a big place. We don't need it anymore. We'll sell it. Whatever the house sells for, whatever it makes, then we divide that up. And that's the easiest way because the market bears what it does. The house is worth what it is, and you get your money out of it. But if one party does want to stay there, you've got a couple different options. You can either, the one party that's going to stay there keeps their half of the value of the house. So let's say there's $200,000 in the house. 1,000 belongs to one spouse, 100,000 belongs to another spouse. You can give the spouse who's not keeping the house something else from the marital assets to make up for what they lost from the value of the house. Another way to settle it might be you say, okay, I'll buy you out. I'll pay you either in a lump sum or maybe I'll pay you in monthly installments for the next 5 years to make up for the value of the house that I'm going to be keeping and that you're not. So again, let's take that $200,000 assessment, right? So if I'm keeping the house and you're the one moving out, maybe I pay you $50,000 a year for the next 2 years to make up for your $100,000 that you're missing out of from the house. So that's another way to do it. And there's other more creative ways too, depending on what other assets are out there in the marital estate. But those are the two most common. Either sell the house or the person keeping the house buys the other party out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And as you've been saying all along here, a lot of this is negotiated. It's just, what the two parties can come to an agreement on, as far, in the house and any retirement, all of it comes into play. It's all part of who they were as a married couple.
And I have people ask all the time too, well, what about the retirement accounts? How does that get handled? Well, oftentimes the accounts will be split. They'll be split into two accounts. So if you're the party who has all the retirement accounts, and you're getting divorced, your retirement account will be, let's say you have it with Fidelity. Your Fidelity account will be split into two, one for you, one for your spouse. And depending on the percentage, if it's a 50-50 split, that's how they'll split it up. But the account will stay there. It stays with the plan, and the spouse who is getting her half of the account will have all the same benefits and have to manage the account in the same fashion that you would under Fidelity's management. And they can do whatever they want with it too, invest it how they will. But it is a retirement account. It's subject to all the same restrictions too. So if you decide, hey, I want to pull that money out and use it, you can do that, but you're paying all the same taxes and penalties and fees on it because it is a retirement account. It's not just an account of money that you're going to be able to access after your retirement. And the same with pensions. It works the same way. So you divide them up. Everybody gets their portion. You'll have something available for you, and the non-working spouse or the spouse who may not have worked as much will now have retirement accounts available to them to use and do with what they want, to set up and put it in other people's names as beneficiaries and so on, should something happen to them, in the same fashion that you have for your account as the owner of the account. But it's now split up into two. So you still will get access to retirement benefits. So that way when you go into retirement as well, you can now get retirement benefits too from the marriage, if you will.
All right. Yeah. Whew. That was great insight right there.
A lot of information.
Absolutely, but really solid information. And so, I think it's just one of those things where you're looking at the information from a standpoint of, okay, not everything pertains perhaps, but a good chunk of it does. And I just need an idea of how things are going to flow from that standpoint. Right. Now, this actually is going to wrap up day 3 of 5 of our interview series. If you haven't caught the first 2 days of our interview here with Chris, I advise you to go back and listen to those. They had different questions and they were really good days as well. So tomorrow, I want you to join us again. We're going to continue our discussion with Chris as we talk more on the traditional divorce side of things. And Chris and I would like to thank you for joining us today on this episode of Breaking Ties, the interview series. His contact information will be in the description of the podcast, so you can reach out with your other questions you might have. And remember, divorce is not the end of your story. It is the start of your next great chapter. And with that, we will see you all tomorrow. Have a fantastic day.
See you tomorrow.
Hello, and welcome to really the 4th day of 5 in our Breaking Ties interview series this week, where we're talking with Chris Lunardini, who is an attorney with SPYRATOSDAVIS. Hey, I got it right on the first try this time this week. Goodness. They're in Lisle, Illinois, and I'm your host, Mike Fulkerson, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst professional. And Chris has been with us all week, and he's been answering some of those common questions we have with great detail and a lot of information. So if you haven't caught the previous 3 days, you're going to want to go back and you're going to want to listen to those podcasts as well, because he's going to fill you in on some of the little tidbits that go on through the divorce process. And once again, welcome back to the show, Chris.
Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. Now, today we're going to mix it up a little bit. I mean, I think we did property yesterday. We kind of did the process a little before that and fees and things. But today it's all about the kids. We're going to talk about, just the different aspects of if you have children, what can we kind of expect? And let's start with the parenting plan and how does that come about?
Sure. So parenting plan, what is that? So the parenting plan is made up of 2 aspects. It's made up of what we call the parental responsibility. That's who's making the decisions on the big issues. More often than not, it's going to be joint, but there are some situations where one parent or the other may have sole decision making. And it may not be for all the decisions. It may only be for some of them. But that's the first part of the parenting plan. The second part is in what we call the parenting time or visitation. That's going to spell out what time does each parent have with the children. Generally, what is that schedule? How often are you seeing them on a weekly or on a bi-weekly basis? What kind of exceptions are there? What does the holidays look like? What does summer parenting time look like? And how does that change? Is it going to be the same throughout the entire year? Or is it going to change up? You're going to have one parenting plan during the school year, and you're going to have something a little different over the summer. So those are the biggest parts of any parenting plan.
Nice. Yeah, I know what you mean as far as the differences, especially kids and school breaks and stuff. Because even my parenting plan is different during the summer. I mean, I get weeks at a time versus just days of the week during the school year kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, all that stuff gets thought out and worked through, and basically, 1, you want to make sure it's best for the kids. And 2, you want to make sure it's really kind of fair for what you feel is, your time with them, because this is going to go on until the kid turns 18. So you're going to stick with this for quite some time.
Right. And the good thing about any parenting plan is it can be and is expected to be modifiable by the parties. The better the parties work with each other, the better you're going to be able to adjust that parenting plan as life changes. Because everybody knows, especially when kids start going from middle school into high school, their habits, their lifestyles change a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And that may or may not include more time with the parents, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's fine. But if the parents can work together, you can modify it as you need to as those changes occur. If you don't, then at least the parenting plan hopefully should lay out a basis and a basic outline for what everyone should expect. And that's what you want from a good parenting plan. You want it to be flexible, but you want it to have enough information in it so that everyone knows what is their expectation, what do they need to follow so they can get into a routine.
Right. Yeah. And I know exactly. Yeah. And I think as a parent, you also have to be flexible with your kids as they get older. So, I know my son now, has the girlfriend. And so I don't see him on the normal times, a lot of times, some days I don't get it. I'm supposed to have him, but he doesn't come because I let him go spend time with the girlfriend. They study at the library, whatever they're doing kind of thing. And that's just to me part of the process of just having adult kids, helping them be independent and learn things on their own. But yet, at the same time, I try to get as much time as I can with them.
Yep. And that's what hopefully everyone is trying to do and make it work. You don't want it to be a situation where either the parents or where any of the kids have to be kind of dragged to their parenting time. You want everybody to participate and be involved in it and doing the parenting time because maybe they don't always really want to, but they want to make sure they have a relationship with their parent. That's what you really want out of a parenting schedule is everyone to participate and be willing to make it work for everyone else.
Right. Yeah.
I think parenting plan can be obviously one of the biggest and most disputed parts of any divorce. So I think part of the spouses and the parties need to realize you need to figure out what are the most important things in your parenting plan. What are the most important things to you to get with regard to time with your kids? You need to figure out when the two of you are getting the divorce completed, the two spouses. Are you going to continue living close to each other or are you going to live far away? That's going to be one of the biggest issues to work out a parenting plan. If you're moving and you're going to be half hour, 45 minutes, an hour away, that's going to impact significantly what kind of parenting plan you're going to have because travel time now plays a big role. If you're both going to be staying close to each other, and the closer, I will tell you, the closer you can stay to living near your spouse while the children are still under 18, the easier it's going to make to make a parenting plan work. If you can be within 5, 10, 15 minutes of your spouse, there's a whole lot more flexibility in any kind of parenting plan. So, which is, I think, always a good thing. That gives us a lot more options to make a parenting plan work with everyone's schedule.
Right, exactly. Now, when we talk about parenting plans, we have kids and stuff. Like we really can't leave out the child support piece. No. Is there some down and dirty way that it's figured out that isn't super complicated?
There is a formula. The best way to actually kind of get an idea, go to Google, search for Illinois Child Support Calculator. It'll bring you to the official Illinois Child Support page, and it gives you a form that you can, online form that you can fill out. You can put in how many kids you have, how many overnights you have, what everybody's income is before taxes or after taxes, whichever information you have. And it'll give you an estimate of what your child support is. Going over the formula, I think here would be a lot more technical and more than people need. But that's probably the best way. And again, be flexible with that because you have to understand, yes, people don't like to pay child support. I get it. I see it all the time. That's one of the biggest issues we deal with is one of the spouses ends up having to pay something. They're like, I don't want to pay child support. Nobody wants to. But understand the reason you're paying is because you have the children less often. And because of that, you're in just the general way things go. You're paying less expenses as a result. You're buying less food. You're paying less in utilities. You're buying less clothing. So the spouse that has the children more often is typically paying more. And that's why the child support system was set up the way it was in Illinois. So even though you're paying and you're going to be paying your spouse for whatever reason that you're going to be paying it, understand that that's the premise behind it. It's because the court is trying to kind of even out those responsibilities. And you're not getting away from it. There's very few circumstances where somebody doesn't pay any child support. So be ready for that. If you are going to be having the children less often than the other spouse, understand and be ready for it. You're going to be paying some child support. And you're going to be paying into covering the uncovered medical costs, school costs, extracurriculars, all those sorts of things too. So,
right, exactly. And I think one of the interesting tidbits with child support is kind of a fixed number, but there is also expenses on top of that, like you were just
Yeah,
saying, with extracurriculars, medical costs, things like that, that will come into play a lot of times for the child as well.
right. And the better you get, the better you're able to talk with your spouse about those things, even after the divorce, the easier it is to kind of budget for those costs. Make sure that they're reasonable costs. Make sure that they're costs that you both can agree on, your child participating in those activities and so on. Yes, you don't have to be the best friends or friends at all with your spouse when the divorce is done, but you do have to figure out a way to work with them to make these expenses and these budgets work, because the children you have with them, that responsibility is not going away until they turn 18. So you need to figure out a way to make it work and to communicate to some extent on those issues.
Right, exactly. Well, hey, I appreciate another great day of information here. We are actually done with day 4. And if you haven't listened to the previous 3 days, you really ought to go back and find out the other information that we talked about this week, because it has been extremely good. I would like to, mention again that Chris's information is going to be in the description, so you can reach out to him with any additional questions or information you would like to learn. And he and I would like to thank you for joining us today on this episode of Breaking Ties, the interview series. And remember, divorce is not the end of your story. It is the start of your next great chapter. And with that, we will see you all tomorrow. Have a fantastic evening.
See you tomorrow.
Hello, and welcome back to our last day of the Breaking Ties interview series with Chris Lunardini. I'm your host, Mike Fulkerson, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst professional. And Chris has been with us all week, and he's been answering the questions. And I tell you what, the information and detail he's providing, just the little nuggets and tidbits, is just, it's really cool, I think. I mean, you always learn something in these podcast interviews, and this week's was no exception. It's always great to get it straight from somebody who's so involved in the process themselves. Now, Chris is a divorce attorney with SPYRATOSDAVIS in Lisle, Illinois. And we are actually, like I said, on our last day. What do you think of the week so far, Chris?
I think it's been great. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm glad I'm able to share some information with people, because I think that's really important in the divorce process.
Absolutely, because there is a lot of stuff going on during the divorce process. So anything you can do to bone up or learn, as you're going through it or before you go through it, is only going to help you as the process goes on. And let's see. Well, since we're winding down today, we're let's get on a little bit of a feisty topic, and that's what if your spouse doesn't cooperate?
That's a good one. I do get those. I think you've got 2 types of uncooperative spouses. You have the one where they don't cooperate from the beginning, and actually that's not too bad of a situation. If they're not cooperating from the beginning, really all you have to do is make sure they're served with the paperwork. Make sure your attorney reaches out to them to see if they'll get involved. Make sure they're given notice of the upcoming court dates. And then if they fail to show up and don't participate, and they're supposed to file something with the court called an appearance, which is a document that says, I'm here, I'm representing myself, or I have an attorney representing me, and it lets the court know how to contact them. If a party doesn't file their appearance and they're not participating and not showing up in court, the court can do what's called default the party. And when they're in default, that means they're prohibited from kind of giving their side of the story and their side of the divorce. And once they're in default, the court can enter a divorce judgment in favor of the cooperative spouse. And as long as what the cooperative spouse is asking for is pretty reasonable. Mm-hmm. And of course, your attorney will help you figure that out, what should be reasonable, what you should ask for. And the court will then enter a divorce judgment pretty consistent. I've experienced in most of my cases, pretty consistent with what you're asking for when that happens. So that's not too bad. So if you've got a spouse who's saying, I'm not gonna show up, I'm not gonna participate, I don't agree to this, that's perfectly fine. You can still file for divorce. You don't have to have the parties agreeing that they're going to get a divorce to get one in Illinois. Okay, file the divorce. Your attorney will help you through it. If they don't show up, you'll still get a divorce judgment. Now, the more difficult one is when you get a party who's actually participating. They've hired an attorney, but they're being uncooperative throughout the process. And that can be difficult. So oftentimes I tell clients, if your spouse is being uncooperative, we just try and be as reasonable as possible and try to make offers that are reasonable to see if we can engage them. If you can't engage them and they're still fighting everything and they're still being difficult, there's different processes you can use, like mediation. You've heard of mediation, right, Mike?
I have, sir.
So you can use mediation. You can either use a private mediator. Yes, it will cost a little more. Oftentimes it's about $1,000 per session, give or take. That will be added on to the expense to budget for it, but that can oftentimes be cheaper than trying a case. You have a guess as to how much it takes to cost, or how much it costs to try a divorce case, Mike?
Oh boy, good. Just to try it, right? You got to have I would put my number on 10 grand.
You're looking at 10 to 20 grand, and it could be more. If that's just the trial part. That's not the other aspects
right
leading up to it. So it can get expensive fast. So mediation is a good route. You can go if the spouse is not being cooperative. A mediator is going to be a third party who steps in, talks to both of the parties, and tries to get them to agree on issues. Mediator may or may not be able to settle all of them, but at least if the mediator can settle some of them, that's fewer issues you have to take to trial down the road, and that means a less expensive trial. Mediation is often used by the courts for the parenting issues. As a matter of fact, if the parties can't reach an agreement on the parenting issues, the court will often require them to participate in mediation to try and work it out first before going through the litigation process, because the court does not want the kids to be kind of dragged into the litigation of the divorce. So you'll, at the very least, have to mediate the parenting issues. Again, the court can't tell you or can't force you to agree, but the process itself usually results in some agreements, if not all of the issues resolved. And then I think the best way to kind of handle an uncooperative spouse, if you've tried all those things, you can go into the court and have the court hold what we call pretrial conferences or settlement conferences. And the judge will take it's not in a trial setting, it's more of an informal look at the case. But most judges, like I can tell you, especially in the suburban counties, all the judges who are in the divorce courts, they're experienced divorce attorneys typically. They've got experience in the areas of law and how to make decisions on things. So the judges will sit down and do these conferences with the attorneys and give them recommendations. And very often those recommendations are going to be pretty close to what the judge is going to say if it were to go to trial. So that gives everybody a good idea, and hopefully that can get parties to settle. So those are probably the biggest things you can do if you've got an uncooperative spouse. The last straw is push the matter to trial. Nobody likes to hear it. It's expensive, and it does take time. But if you see that you're going to have an uncooperative spouse from early on, just start getting yourself ready for, we're going to have to go to trial on this, and just try to push it to trial as soon as possible. Because the sooner you get it to trial, it'll cut down on those expenses. And you know what? Oftentimes, I will tell you, I've probably, what do you think? How many cases do you think I've tried? Or what percentage of divorce cases do you think I've tried, Mike?
Oh, percentage?
Yes.
I actually don't think it's all that high. I would go probably 5 to 10%.
Yeah, that's definitely, that's right in the range. Yes, 5 to 10% of my divorce cases go to trial, and that's pretty consistent with the entire with the whole practice area. So more often than not, you push a case to trial on the steps of the courthouse the day before or the day of. The other party is finally going to start becoming reasonable and agreeable, and you'll reach a settlement. And it'll be at the 11th hour, but it's better than trying the case. So very often just having that pressure will get the party to a point to settle and get them to be more cooperative. But and if not, you go to trial and the judge decides, and the case will be over. You know, you will bring a conclusion to the case one way or the other.
Yeah, I think a lot of people envision most of the divorces are the trial kind. I mean, because that's what's always like glamorized and always
Yes.
out there, kind of, but it's actually the exact opposite. It's
Mhm.
actually the kind of the rare exception that they actually do go to trial, because the problem you got there is you have no control at that stage. Then it's just a matter of the verdict of handing it down, and you got to just abide by it.
Right. And most the great majority of judges are going to try to do their best for the parties. But
Hmm.
they're one person and they don't know your whole life story. They don't know everything that's gone on in your divorce and your marriage. And they're going to try to do as best as they can with the information they have. Um, so they'll try to do a good job, but it's unlikely and it's uncommon that both parties come out of a divorce saying, yes, that was great. I'm glad I went to trial and that was a great decision for me. Most of the time, they're feeling a little bit in between. Okay, I like some of the stuff, but some of the other stuff I'm not really happy with. So if the parties can work it out between them and have a little more control over it, that's always a good thing. Because if the judge has to decide, like you said, that's it, that's the way it is, it's in an order, now you got to abide by it.
That's it. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, we're going to wind down the week here. And I always like to offer our guests an opportunity to share just a little piece of wisdom, something, that you find that's important, some final thoughts on just divorce.
Sure. So my best bit of advice would be when you're going into it, talk to your attorney. Don't be afraid to ask questions and get yourself organized and have an understanding of what you're looking for. What are the most important things for you? Make a priority list. Don't fight every battle. Don't look to make every point an issue to dispute. Pick the most important ones and work on those. You're going to have to prioritize, and you're going to have to learn to work a little bit with the other side.
You know what? That's really good. That's really great advice, because you're not going to win it all.
No,
You got to give some, you take some, but you die. The old die on certain hills, basically.
no, it never works. It never works.
It never does. Well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate you coming on all week. Our listeners got some very valuable information, and I'm appreciative that you shared what you did. And I tell you, we just scratched the surface. We might have to have you back on at a future date again.
Anytime, Mike. Anytime.
Excellent. Well, this ends our week-long series. And once again, you're going to want to go back. If this is your first episode, go back the rest of the week, catch all the questions that Chris answered. That was really fantastic information. And then really, we're going to wind this down with just if you need help in his services, you got questions for him, his contact information's over in the description. Don't hesitate to reach out. And from Chris and I, we'd like to thank you for joining us all week on the Breaking Ties interview series. And remember, as I say all the time, divorce is not the end of your story. It is the start of your next great chapter. All right, everybody, take care, and we'll catch you on the next interview.
Take care. Thank you so much, Mike.